Good evening, everyone. It is now 5:30, and I will call this work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And if the clerk will note that Councilmember Keeley is on Zoom, he is in quarantine, and also Community Development Director Jenny Faulkner is also on Zoom, but all council members and other city staff are in the chambers. This meeting is being conducted in person and also online. And so members of the public may attend in person if they wish, or you can watch this meeting online at burnsvillemn.gov/meetings or Comcast channel 16 or 859. The public can also participate through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join. More information is available on the meeting webpage and in the council agenda package. Our work sessions are all very informal, and so we go directly to the items on the agenda. And we have 2 items on the agenda this evening. All other items that were posted earlier are being continued to a future date. The first item on the agenda is the MPCA update for the Freeway landfill. And presenting is Mr. Kirk Kudelka from the MPCA. He is the Assistant Commissioner for MPCA. Good evening, Mr. Kudelka. Good to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mayor. As mentioned, my name is Kirk Kudelka. I'm an Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and work on land issues, which include our remediation programs along with our solid waste programs. And I have a number of colleagues here tonight with me. So first off, we'll start with an update on Freeway landfill. So I'm going to introduce Hans Navy, who is our closed landfill program manager, and Jamie Wallerstedt, who is our remediation division director. And I'm going to turn it over to Hans to start off the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Hans.
Yeah, thank you. As Kirk mentioned, I'm the manager of the closed landfill program at MPCA. I have a few slides to go through to give you an update tonight. So freeway landfill and freeway dump, when we say freeway, we're talking about 2 different waste deposits for 6 million cubic yards, approximately over 174 acres. Next slide. So this shows our process moving forward with the freeway landfill project. Where we are right now is we're completing the cleanup designs, and that encompasses 2 different designs, a dig and haul option and also a dig and line option. Once we complete the design work, what will come next is property access. We'll be in a position to receive access to implement the cleanup work on the property. That'll be the next step. Once access is secured, we will bid the project. We'll bid the 2 cleanup plans. We'll bid dig and haul and also the dig and line option. We'll receive the bids. We can take those to the legislature. The next step to move the project forward would be the project is included in a funding bill passed by the legislature, and this would fund one of the 2 cleanup plans. This is when the final plan for cleanup would be selected. And that would be followed by construction, and depending on the design that is funded, it would be a 3 to 8 year construction project. The bottom of the slide shows some details about the 2 different cleanup options that we're completing design work on now. The dig and line design would move all the waste from the freeway dump over to freeway landfill, and a new modern landfill would be constructed on the current freeway landfill site. The new modern landfill would have a liner and a impermeable cover, a leachate collection system, a methane control system, and a stormwater management system. This would be approximately 76 acre landfill on the property, and leaving about 9 acres potentially available for use on the landfill parcel. This is in addition to the freeway dump parcel, which would be free of waste. This new landfill would be about 45 feet above the existing grade, and the project would cost, we're estimating now, approximately $120 million, and would take 6 to 8 years to complete. The dig and haul project would excavate all the waste at Freeway dump and Freeway landfill and move it to a different permanent disposal facilities, or more likely multiple disposal facilities. This would free up roughly 103 acres on the current landfill parcel. And we are giving a price range here because there's variability depending on just the tipping fees and also taxes. And this is a shorter construction project, but still 3 to 5 years. Both of these are very large construction projects. Where we currently are is in the design, finishing up the design phase. Next slide. So we're working on a document now that we call the 90% design. And 90% means we're almost done with it. We have 2 90% designs in draft for each of the cleanup options. What we're doing now is we've hired a third-party contractor to review the 90% designs. And we're in the process of having conversations with the contractor who did the design and also the contractor who reviewed the design. The next step will be to finalize the design for both cleanup options. Next slide. In addition to the design work that's going on, we're also doing some additional work to sort of refine our understanding of one area where the waste is. We've got a pretty good understanding now, but to complete the design, we'd like to have a little better understanding. So the image on the slide shows the westernmost portion of the Freeway landfill. You can see the Minnesota River and the Freeway quarry that's adjacent. We're doing 2 kinds of field work. One is test trenching that we use to figure out where the area of waste is. It's a simple matter to dig a trench, and it's a visual inspection to see is there or is there not waste there, and you get also some idea of the type of waste that's there. So this last December, contractor completed 8 test trenches with the goal of refining the waste boundary in this area. And we're currently waiting for the final report. Field work's been completed, but we don't have the results yet. We're also planning to refine our understanding of the groundwater contamination in this area through installation of additional monitoring wells. There are 6 planned locations for new wells. They're shown in yellow on the map. This work we hope to complete in the next few months with a report to follow after that. And I'll turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Kudelka.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. On the next slide, really addresses one of the other 2 primary issues that need to be taken care of, and that is access to the property to allow for the bid process to move forward, and for when bids are put forward and legislature provides money, ability to do the property. We have talked in the past about how the closed landfill program was created, and it set up two things that landfill owners needed to do to keep their part of the deal. The state would take over the care of these landfills long-term. In exchange, landfills had to turn over their insurance policy and then allow the state to do the necessary remediation work on the property and allow access in that. In this case, we have not been able to complete that second part. We have an uncooperative landfill owner, unfortunately, which is not allowing for us to move forward through the binding agreement that would allow for us to do the actual cleanup of the property. And as a result, the legislature a few years ago in 2017 created a path forward to address those types of situations. As we started utilizing and looking at that process to address the future human health and environmental risks here, we noticed a few changes needed to be made and identified. And that's where the slide here talks about legislation that was passed in the 2021 special session. So in July, there were some updates to that law that really does help allow for access to the property. And it does a couple things. One, it protects the state and the state taxpayers by making sure that it can move forward and be provided access to the property and then recover expenses from the uncooperative landfill owner. The second part is it also protects the landfill owner from double liability. For example, if the state were to acquire the property at a low value, say it was due to contamination, and potentially having the owner still cover those remediation costs. The legislation here is pretty clear, and it follows local governments and state governments' actions. It would pay for the cost of the property based on the cleaned up value, and so it wouldn't face that potential double liability. And so what it does is it really closes a gap that was in the system, where under the earlier legislation that was passed in 2017, where the estates would move forward and have property, access to the property. And then on the other side, then collect the costs after the fact, after the state had already paid the dollars. So what it did is it put these two processes together. And so they were done at the same time, adhering to the other principles and property rights that are afforded through the system. And so this would allow for resolving of the access issue that we talked about earlier, and one of the steps in the process that we need to move forward with. So with that, that's the end of our update on the freeway landfill. The next slide is our brief conversation on the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill. And I'd like to introduce Dave Benke, our Division Director for the Resource Management and Assistance Division, which houses our solid waste program. And we also have Beth Gallery on the line today, who's our permit supervisor for the solid waste program, and also Cliff Shirk, who is one of our permit writers. And so, Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kirk. And Mayor and members of the City Council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update. You asked for an update on the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill. I think you're pretty familiar with the project, so I really want to update you on the processes that go along with that facility and really kind of address their status. Next slide, please. When you look at the processes that we need to go through for a facility like the Burnsville landfill, you can kind of think of them on two levels. You can think about on a regional level and on a site-specific level. You think on the regional level, to start with, all of the solid waste planning or different planning efforts take place, including, in this case, the Metro Policy Plan, which really is a document that guides how waste is managed in the metro area. And then the Certificate of Need process, which is the regional determination of how landfill space in the region, how much we're going to need. If you look more on a site-specific level, you can take a look at the environmental review end of things. And that really is the way we look at the site-specific impacts of the project. The environmental review provides decision makers with usable information as they might have to continue to regulate or permit the facility. And it's the environmental effects of the project. It in and of itself isn't a decision-making document. It's more of an informing document. One example of an environmental review document is an environmental impact statement, and that was required for the Burnsville landfill because of the size of the expansion. An EIS really needs to be an analytical document. It needs to describe the proposed action, it needs to analyze its environmental impacts, discuss its alternative, and share that with others who might need to manage the facility, and look for ways for any of those impacts to be mitigated. Once the need for a facility is established through the regional planning and evaluated through the environmental review process, you can do your permitting. Information from the planning and the environmental review phases are used to support the permitting process, and that includes the review of the permit application for its technical adequacy, compliance with different solid waste rules. The permit's then written with the conditions that serve as the safeguards for the environmental protection for the facility into the future. And a solid waste facility can have several different kinds of permits, not just the solid waste permit, but there might be water, air, and other permits as well as local permits. And as I said, that environmental review process helps inform all the decision makers in those processes. And while this seems like a fairly linear, process based on the figure, there are a lot of feedback loops in the processes. For example, the final determination of certificate of need actually can't be made until the environmental review is done. And so you can see that arrow kind of feeding that loop. Also, the permit application itself helps understand the environmental review. And so a good process or a good part of the process looks at the application and its impacts and determination with the environmental review. So although the decision making has to be followed in that environmental review has to become before the certificate of need or the issuance of the permit, those processes can continue on in a parallel process. So it doesn't have to be such a lengthy process. To take a look at those in a little bit more detail, we'll look at the planning process first on the next slide, please. So when you look at the planning, that's really done in order to deliberately develop and financially secure and the financial security of these waste facilities. It has to be done in an orderly way so that they are able to manage the facility with enough waste, but also have enough waste coming into the facilities to make sure their obligations into the future can be managed. We start with the Metro Policy Plan as the basis for the planning in the metro area. It's revised every 6 years. Currently, we're working off the version approved in April of 2017. We anticipate a new facility coming out, or not a new facility, but a new plan coming out to take a look at managing the waste next summer. But in the meantime, the policy plan articulates the goals and policies for waste reduction, waste management. You can think of it as recycling and composting and household hazardous waste management in the metro area. Each one of the metro counties then approves their own master plan, which is then approved by the agency. And that sets the local goals. So the goal of all of the planning is to decrease landfilling of mixed municipal solid waste, or what we commonly refer to as garbage, and move that waste up the hierarchy to the highest and best management that it can have. The policy plan needs to be followed by all folks in the metro area, the landfills, the waste haulers, the cities, the counties, and the citizens and businesses. As I said, the target for the next one is to have a draft out next summer. If you think about the planning as a book, and you took all the garbage from the metro area and ran it through that book, the pages would be the programs that would manage waste, like the recycling programs or the composting programs, household hazardous waste, waste energy, and that would all capture a certain amount of the waste and manage it that way. What would come out the bottom would be what we would look at for the landfill disposal need. That amount is issued through the certificate of need process. In January of 21, we finalized the process for the certificate of need. It was looking at how much waste that we need to landfill, and we got applications in from 4 different facilities. There was a 180-day application period to allow facilities time to apply. You need to remember that in 2019, we lost the Great River Energy Waste to Energy facility. And so with that closed, we lost about 33% of the waste energy capacity. And so the landfill volumes that were needed were increasing. As a result of the, if you look at the other requirements in statute, all of the waste energy facilities need to be operating at full capacity. And when that happened, we were able to open up the certificate of need process. That began, and we got applications in from the facilities listed on the slide. In May of 21, we made a preliminary determination and announced that for public comment. In October, we have given preliminary determination for the amounts that need to go to the different facilities. Now, as I mentioned before, you can't permit a facility until the environmental review is done. You can't issue CON, but the preliminary determination, once the environmental impact statement process is done, can then be issued. The facilities listed have various volumes, and because a couple of them are new facilities for receiving mixed municipal solid waste, they will need to go through both the environmental review and the permitting process as well. And so in all of that, we determined that we only wanted to look at issuance of certificate of need for the next 7 years and established that as the time frame and the amount of waste that we're looking at. So back to the processes. The other process next on the original slide was the environmental review. So if you go to the next slide, the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill has been undergoing what's called a supplemental environmental impact statement. Now, this is used to provide decision makers with usable information for the ongoing management and permitting of that facility. It's looking at things like the waste volume and composition of the waste that's coming in, the impacts that it potentially has on groundwater, on surface water, on the air, engineering controls, and social logical impacts. This is a supplemental environmental impact statement because the Burnsville landfill went through previous environmental impact statements back in 1981, 91, and 2005. So the supplemental environmental impact builds on those rather than starts from scratch. We do a scoping document to see what needs to be looked at, and then we start the process of environmental review. Finally, we're going to have 2 versions issued for public comment. We've done that. In June 2021, the draft initial supplemental was issued, and finally in December, the final supplemental environmental impact statement was issued. The first we wanted comments on for the contents of the supplemental environmental impact statement, and now we're looking for the adequacy of that. Did it address those things that are in the scope or not? The agency will prepare a response to comments for the final and the findings of fact, and the commissioner will make a determination of adequacy on the final supplemental environmental impact statement as things are wrapping up in that process. The next slide talks a little bit about then what's the final step for this facility. The purpose of permitting, as I mentioned initially, was really, we're looking at the site-specific requirements that we want of the facility, the permit conditions as we call them. Landfills are a necessary part of the system, and we want to make sure that they operate in a way that's protective of the environment. So we received an application for this facility, recognized that the environmental impact statement or the environmental review would be necessary. So we initially, looked at the application and said, there's a few more steps that you need to complete before we can determine that it's adequate. But at the same time, we can do some preliminary review and keep things rolling in terms of review of it until those process pieces were done. We're right now in the steps as we're awaiting the, sorry about that. As we're awaiting the environmental impact statement to be wrapped up and begin in earnest the final review, evaluating the design, the operations, the environmental monitoring, any contingency actions we need for the facility, and making sure that we're working with stakeholders and the permittee or the applicant at the same time. So that's the update there. I will answer any questions that you might have about this, and I'm sure if you've got questions about the other presentation, you're welcome to ask those as well.
Very much. And there are some questions. My question with regard to the certificate of need for Burnsville, I saw that November 21st was a date that you had up on the screen.
Yes, Mayor. The issuance of the certificate of need can't happen until after the environmental review is completed. But we've done a preliminary issuance determination that we think of a certain volume for the next 7 years would be necessary. When we look at that volume for all the facilities across the metro area, we looked at how much they currently are receiving, how much is within the various companies' control, how much was expected to be generated, and where it was currently going to make that determination. For the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill, that CON determination is approximately 1.6 million tons. For the other facilities, it varies a little bit, but that was based off of the projections and where things have been at with those considerations we have.
So my question is, when do you anticipate getting to all of that information? Because I see that 3 of the landfills are in Dakota County and 1 in Scott that you're evaluating at this time. So I'm just wanting to understand, when do we get to that process where you've gotten all of the information that you need to make a determination for the certificate of need?
Mayor and members of the council, that's a great question. One of the reasons we put up the process slide was to kind of let you know what things have to happen in what order. So to make a decision on the certificate of need, we have to have the completion of the supplemental environmental impact statement. And for the Burnsville landfill, that's wrapping up soon. We'll have a determination of adequacy of that this winter here. And so we can probably expect to have the review, the certificate of need finalized if that adequacy determination is there for that. For the other facilities, I mentioned the DEMCON facility and the Rich Valley were new facilities. And so they haven't received mixed municipal solid waste in the past, and they would have to go through both the environmental review and the permitting stages. And we anticipate those to happen and probably take a couple of years on each one of those facilities. For the last facility, the Pine Bend Sanitary Landfill, we have issued the certificate of need request for that facility. That was part of an initial application environmental review already that's happened. So that will be the certificate of need then can be incorporated into that permit, and the permit modified to include those additional tons. So that timeline is that one's pretty well complete. The others are ongoing with the winter here for Burnsville and probably the next 2 years for the other 2 facilities.
Let's see, are there any other questions for David? I'll go to Kara, and then I think Councilmember Keeley, did you have questions for David or for Kadelka?
I plugged them all in the chat for Kirk, but David could probably handle the last couple because he spoke specifically to those 2. One is about the percentage of solid municipal waste versus recycling in the goal and the forecast, and how does that compare with what people are actually throwing away today? And then the other is related to where does the garbage come from? Either one of you probably know the answer to that.
The last one's a little bit easier than the first. So, Mayor and members of the council, the waste facilities in the metropolitan area are considered regional facilities, whether they're serving one or multiple counties. In the case of the landfills draw waste from all throughout the metro area counties. And so the Dakota County facility at Burnsville will continue to receive waste from outside of the county, but mainly from the metropolitan area.
Do you have any idea what percentage comes from outside of Dakota County? Is it maybe the majority of it?
We can get you back the exact, I would say that there's a higher percentage that comes from outside, but I can get you the exact numbers on that.
Thank you. I think I'd heard at one point, maybe 60% came from Hennepin County, but then there's other counties, obviously there's Scott County that may dump there and others. So I was curious. Then the other question is, in your forecast for the 7-year capacity, what was the percentage of, the household garbage, which is municipal waste, but also a lot of recycling? What percentage of what people are throwing out is going in the landfill versus recycling today in real numbers? And how does that compare to the numbers that you used in your forecast to say we gave them 7 years of capacity based on what reality today, or what is really the preferred goal that we all have, which probably has more heavier weight on more recycling?
Mayor and members of the council, that was a little bit of both. Knowing that we've got a goal, we also looked at what was actually happened and what's been planned. Knowing that there's some activities going on with organics and other things that are coming online, that was included as part of what's being diverted. But as far as the recycling rates and so forth, they were looked at more in terms of what's actually happening, and not necessarily those aspirational goals that are there. Those goals are out a number of years as well. And as I said, this too is a 7-year look. And that's why we chose to look at it in that increment too, is that we probably need to keep continuing to look at this. Commissioner Kudelka and I had a chance to talk about these processes with various Rotary clubs and city councils over the last year. And every city will tell you they're doing a great job in recycling, and I don't doubt that. And that's what we want to hear. And that's what we want to have people continue to advance those programs so that we can look at this and say, well, our determination of landfill need is something that we want to keep looking at, and it's not static when we evaluate it. So more programs, more people participating, more opportunity will lead to driving that down.
Well, and part of oh, sorry, Kirk, Mr. Kudelka, you want to jump in before I follow up?
If that's okay, Mayor and City Council members, just a little bit more specificity. So it's the exact numbers that are built off of today. And then the county's forecasted possible changes. So Dakota County, Hennepin, Ramsey, for instance, forecasted changes based on their county plan that Dave mentioned earlier. And so there are small changes. So it's based on the number today, small changes based on the forecast in their plans, but not, for instance, the 75% goal that is mentioned in statute as mentioned. So as Dave mentioned, we build off that base of today's waste.
Thank you. That has dramatic impact on us as a city because, as you know, we gain host fee revenue in lieu of fully developed property taxes. And so landfill doesn't necessarily pay the same property taxes as a fully developed mixed use, built out area. So the host fees become a very important, vital role of income for the city that the taxpayers are getting sort of as a little help because we're hosting a regional, as you pointed out, landfill, instead of having, brown dirt buildable soil and putting a massive $1 billion development or so on it, where obviously the revenues would be significant. So the permitting capacity and the length of time is very important to the city of Burnsville. At one point, when trash was not being diverted as it needed to be to remain open and continue to accept some municipal solid waste, the city of Burnsville received in total between two host funds 1.3 million, and today we're $500,000 or greater, less than that. So the taxpayers of Burnsville have had over $500,000 of tax levy relief taken away from them because the landfill has been the delays in regard to getting the additional permitted space has forced them to divert garbage to other places, which has lowered the amount of host fees that the city collects. So we've been financially harmed by this decision and this process over the last few years. And as a city council member and elected to look after the pocketbooks of our taxpayers and our property owners, I am very upset at the fact that we continually lose that revenue because it is a landfill. There's nothing we're going to do that's going to change it and magically turning it into a fully developed multi-billion-dollar development. It is what it is. And having permitted space come in a timely manner, allowing that business to continue to take the waste rather than divert it other places, which thus hurts our host fee revenue, puts our taxpayers at a disadvantage. And they have to essentially pay more in property taxes to make up for that loss. And yet they still have to host a landfill, which isn't fun, by the way. By no stretch will you'll hear any of these council members on the Burnsville City Council bragging about the fact that we are so fortunate as to host a landfill, right? It is what it is, and it's been around since the 60s. So we accept the responsibility, but we want to be treated fairly when it comes to the revenue losses that having a landfill in place of a beautiful, massive development brings. And those host fees are the one piece that helps us as a city a lot. And I don't want to see that number continue to shrink. It needs to go back up to the 1.3 million as fast as possible, but it won't until more permitted capacity is granted so they can stop diverting and continue to take it in as they used to prior to 2019 when this process began. So my point is, when are we going to see an end to this delaying of this process and get this permitted space so the city of Burnsville and the taxpayers of Burnsville can continually see that 1.3 million, if not greater, revenue come in, so we as elected officials don't have to find alternative funding sources or tax higher on our property owners to make up the loss. I know it's a mouthful, but Kirk, you might want to take that one.
Mayor and city council members, thank you for that. And I know in the chat, just the earlier question about how much waste is coming from Dakota County versus others. Dakota County's put in there 55 was county waste and 45 was outside, which is similar to our numbers from, and that's 2021. Our numbers similar from 2022 was 44% from Dakota County. So it's within that ballpark. In terms of the question on timing and that, the certificate of need timing is, and when that can start is outlined in the Metro policy plan. And there are conditions there that capacity for the landfills in the Metro area have to be being filled up. And the second one was that restriction on disposal and the area waste energy facilities needed to be full and landfills complying with restriction on disposal. We were not able to open that process for a while due to the landfills not being in compliance with the restriction on disposal and the waste energy facilities being full. So when that triggered and was opened up, it was because the landfills had been complying with the law and the waste energy facilities were full. That's the timing and circumstances on when certificate of need started. and when it opened up. As was mentioned, the certificate of need process is nearly complete. We have done our analysis in that, have made those preliminary determinations, but as Dave mentioned, the final decision cannot be made until the supplemental EIS is completed. The supplemental EIS is moving forward. We have just now the adequacy decision to be made. So that means we've got to respond to all the comments we received in the last month and then make that adequacy decision and post that. And right now our estimate is that would occur in March. In terms of the permitting, which completes after that, as mentioned, we are starting that process, having those technical conversations with waste management and other parties that are need to have input from it, and that will be a public process. At this point, just given the complexity and the technical pieces, we don't have an estimated timeline moving forward on it. But for the three components, that's been the timeline moving forward. And you know, the kickoff was the certificate of need process, and you know why and when that happened was because of those conditions needed to be met under the Metro Policy Plan.
Thank you. There is no, if I may, Madam Mayor, just a quick follow-up. I'm reading from an email or a notification, an update. I'm on the MPCA's email list related to landfills and many other things. And I was reading one from December, and it walks through this process that we've been talking about. And it says next steps, the comment period, et cetera, ended December 28th. And you're reviewing those comments, as you noted. Address the potential significant issues and alternatives raised in the scoping, provides response to the public comments on the EIS, and was prepared in compliance with the state environmental reviews. And then it closes out by saying, if the commissioner determines the FSEIS is adequate, we may proceed with permitting the project. May is not a very definitive word. And so do you foresee any reasons of any kind, based on all your years of experience, that once you're done with the comment period and you've processed it and reviewed it in March or maybe April, do you see any reason why there would be no reason or any reason at all where that may could turn out to be a rejection or any further delays? Or do you see this moving forward and having as much a chance to be approved as it is called for more questions?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. For that decision, we at this point cannot prejudge any decision as we move forward. The supplemental EIS needs to be completed before final decisions can be made. But that is the part of the process, is going through those technical analysis to make sure that when we do permit it, that is done in a way that can be protective of human health and the environment. And so at this point, you know, we've got to go through that process and make that determination as we move forward. I know that's not a satisfying answer, but it is part of the process and we can't prejudge it. So I understand from where you guys are sitting in your perspective too, that may not be the full answer you're looking for.
Sure. Well, there's a $500,000 and growing annual amount that is at risk here. The rest of that comment in that email says, if not deemed adequate, we meaning the MPCA must revise the full supplemental EIS. So there's the danger on the downside for us. Is a full revision of the EIS take a long time? Can you give us an idea if that were to happen? What are we looking at from a timetable?
Mayor and City Council members, you know, at this point, until we make that determination, I couldn't give an estimate on what would be needed or not needed. It may not be needed, as you know.
We're hoping not.
As a regulatory agency, and I know you have those same things, we can't prejudge, and so a lot of our language is coded in making sure that we have an open process and not prejudging decisions.
Thank you. I know there's probably some other questions. I have a couple others in the chat that if Kirk wants to come back to it after taking some other questions, that's fine. There's no rush. We've got probably quite a few questions.
Councilmember Keeley, I'm now going to recognize Councilmember Kara Schultz.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. So one of the questions I have is looking at the preliminary con amounts. Those amounts appear to be under what would be needed for them to be able to bid on the landfill elimination plan versus just giving us a new landfill by digging and lining. So is it intentional to block a potential bidder out of being able to bid? Because otherwise they would have to haul it down to Iowa and raise the cost exponentially on the landfill elimination plan versus the new landfill plan where you just dig it out, line it, throw her right back down.
Mayor and City Council members, it's a great question. If the dig and haul is moved forward through freeway landfill, we have determined that will not need certificate of need space. And so that is not something that would need to be awarded. It's because that material has already been landfilled once and it's a transfer between landfills. The certificate of need process is about new waste being created and generated and disposed of. And so there would not need to be any certificate of need for a landfill moving forward to accept a waste from the freeway dig and haul project.
That is exceptionally good news to hear. Do we have that somewhere that we can cite, or that, I'm sure you have that in some type of note or regulation or that type of thing. It would be really helpful. Could you forward that
Yeah,
to our city manager, and then we can have that information?
Yeah, because I remember, Kirk, that you had shared that information in the past when we were talking about the dig and haul process. So I know you have that, and it's probably noted someplace in your records.
Mayor and City Council members, we'd be happy to do that. Mayor has a great memory. We were asked to buy this by Waste Management, and we did in a letter make this decision and put it there, and we will forward on that letter because we did memorialize it in it, as the mayor mentioned.
I really appreciate that. In the freeway landfill, when you were going through the different plans, who is that third party contractor who is reviewing the plan? Apologies on that. I don't have that information in front of me.
Hans has it. Hans, the question is about the third-party contractor for the freeway landfill.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. GHD is the third-party contractor.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. And then my third question is, if you decide to go with the new landfill plan versus the landfill elimination plan, have you calculated in the costs that it will be to Burnsville to keep pumping water, to keep it at a level low enough that we're going to be required to keep for decades to come? We had a briefing month ago
Yeah.
or so,
Yep.
and that is when we found out that that is something that we're going to be responsible for, which is keeping the water level below a certain amount. So we're kind of left grasping at, well, what is that going to cost Burnsville on an ongoing basis to maintain a pumping station like that in perpetuity?
I think you've been working with our staff, Kirk and Hans, on those plans as we look to the future, and it's some ways out. So with regard to the lake filling up and how we're going to stabilize that, and that has to do with the sustainability of our water source.
Mayor and City Council members, Hans, I'm going to ask you the question. I don't believe there's any calculation there. We use the most recent information we have on what the level will be. We understand the city has been having more conversations, and I know we will be reaching out and working with Ryan and others to learn more about what that is to make sure our plans are updated accordingly.
Maybe
Yeah,
Ryan
yeah,
has been
Ryan-
starting to calculate the cost to Burnsville on that? Like,
Yeah,
how much would
Ryan,
that
not,
be?
not all of it, because Ryan and our contractors have been working on that and they just present the plan. Ryan, you have any thoughts to add to this conversation?
I would, thanks, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I would just say we are going to be reaching out intentionally very soon to the different agencies and property owners in the area. So that process is yet to officially get underway, but it will very soon. And PCA has reached out to me. So I expect that to begin soon.
Yeah, and you have two engineering firms working with us. You have Black and Beach and,
Black and Beach is our prime, and they do have a consulting modeler as well.
And just to clarify for our residents at home that are watching this, because this was something new that we found out. If there is a decision made by the state to go with the plan that just does a new landfill, meaning they pull the garbage out, they line it, they put the garbage back in, versus the landfill elimination plan, which is they pull the garbage out, they put it in the other landfill, it's remediated, that land can be developed. Not only will we be missing out on tens of millions of tax revenue that could be going to our schools, to our city, to our county, we would be incurring the extra cost of maintaining pumping to keep the water levels down in the lake in perpetuity. So this is something for our residents to understand as we're looking between these two plans, one in which we get a new landfill, it's in the same place, new landfill, but you don't get to develop the land and we have pumping costs, versus a plan that would eliminate a landfill. And then we're able to have safe drinking water. We don't have the pumping issues, and we have some very desirable property on the river that could be developed, that revenue can fund 191, which 191, and pardon my language, they get screwed on revenue. And this would help change that for them. This would be an absolute game changer for them.
I don't think they do, because the state gets, Melanie, is it a quarter on our commercial and
It's just because of how
the-
things got
it's-
carved
it's the-
out.
It's
It's how things got carved out.
They
need to be
get
treated better.
industrial, commercial money, tax-based money that goes into the education fund. And that is about.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely did you, but you
They
know what?
do. and s-
191 deserves the love. They do.
Well,
You know, we
and-
have a lot of school districts that get a fair amount of love. And I would like to see 191 getting the love. I would also like to see our residents getting the love in having reduced property tax.
Yeah.
That would be a heck of a thing.
So I think that's a discussion we'll continue to have, because this is long-term before we get to the whole issue. But we'll get more information about that as we
Yeah.
go forward and we understand the cost, and also what that means when the lake begins to fill up. And
And
that's,
I have
That's
more
about 30.
questions, but I will yield for other people, so I'm not hogging. So, but if long as we can return to a few more
sure, tonight or in the future?
tonight.
Tonight, okay. Anybody else?
I'm pretty good right now.
You're okay? Councilmember Keely, you have other questions?
Well,
Because-
there's two that I put in the chat for Kirk.
Because it's immediate, it's not 30 years out, is Kirk, Commissioner, what is going to be your ask to the legislature? We have our legislators in the room here, but this year, as we move forward, what is the MPCA going to be bringing to the legislators with regard to the freeway landfill?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. At this point, we do not anticipate any ask policy-wise or funding-wise to move forward on the freeway work. We'll continue to do the work that Hans mentioned, to complete the designs and work on the access piece. We need to have a good handle on the numbers to be able to present to the legislature the two choices. And we believe the best way to do that is getting bids, especially on the dig and haul option. I know that's very important to the city. And I think the only true way to know what that cost will be is by seeing those bids. And we want to make sure that we have the most accurate information for the legislature. And so we have decided not to bring that forward because we don't have those numbers. It's taken us so longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And the other thing is that when we're looking at those numbers, Kirk, going forward, because there is today's dollars and there's tomorrow's dollars. So I'm sure that you guys are going to be calculating all of that when we're looking at the estimated costs for dig and haul.
And I don't know if we're gonna have a $7 billion surplus again, so this might be the year, Kirk.
It's not going to do it. Councilmember Keely, do you have anything else that's in the chat that you wanted? Kirk?
Yeah, the first two questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Gadelka, you're presenting at Representative Hansen's House Environmental Committee. And I'm just curious, are you presenting the same as what you presented tonight, or do you have a special presentation for the legislature that's different from tonight?
Mayor and City Council members, thanks for the questions. The topics were chosen by the legislature. So I know there was a question in the chat here about the matching up of various pieces. So we were asked to present on those three pieces. The presentation on Burnsville Sanitary Landfill will be a little bit longer for the legislature because we'll be building in background on what is the project. We've had this conversation and you folks are living this and know what the project is. So we'll build in a little bit more about what is the proposal so folks understand, but you'll see those 3 slides again, but just a little bit more background added to it for the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill. In terms of the question, whether the connections, there is a connection there. Both Pigs Eye and Burnsville are eligible for Melcat. And that might be the connection and why they were bundled that way. We have not, we don't know for sure or not.
The legislature, the committee actually specified the three that what they wanted you to come and speak about.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to refer back to the whole SEIS. Prior to pandemic, how long did it take generally for the process to start to finish, going through a certificate of need, SEIS, and eventual permitting? What was the usual timeline when there wasn't any maybe pandemic going on?
Mayor and City Council members, I'm not sure that we would have a good example. As you can see with, for instance, the comparison to Pine Bend, they've already had their environmental review completed and permitting done. So waste management happens to have all three occurring at the same time. And so I think that is different and unique than maybe some past ones. Now, the two that Dave mentioned, both the Rich Valley and Demcon, will have to go through that same experience of going through all three. So I think that's a different piece there. The larger and complex projects, whether landfills or not, for SEIS do take a while. The real driver on this one was the air piece, the air modeling, the air technical reports. And that's really what took the longest time for the company and the consultants to put together and present to the agency. And this is a complex piece, and I know air modeling especially and technical analysis is a complex piece and tends to take longer and be the driver on many time frames for projects. So I know the company worked hard to move forward on that, but that is a complex aspect of our state and federal regulations, and that does take longer.
And once this process is done and you've got, let's say, a judgment by the commissioner, it's noted that you're going to take this to the governor's office. Can you explain why that is part of this process?
Well, we inform the governor of any decisions we make. And so that is a normal part of our decision-making process. Is to inform them of that.
You mean we're not special here in Burnsville? That we get the governor's ear when we have a major landfill expansion request or anything like that?
Mayor and city council members, the bigger projects that we do, it's more of a notification to make sure that they understand what's going on too.
Thank you. I just want to close out by saying I've watched a lot of Western movies like 1883, the spinoff from Yellowstone, and Mr. Kudelka, I just want to say I'm jealous of your beard and mustache. It looks great. I wish I could grow one with color. Mine is all gray now, so I do not have the ability to sport a great looking mustache and beard like that.
Okay, now I'm going to shift. Councilmember Schultz, you said you had other questions?
I do, but I promise they will not be about your beard or mustache. Okay, so my question is, when you were talking about the state accessing the freeway landfill property, what exactly do you mean by access? Do you mean ownership, or do you mean ability to go on the property even if the property owner says no? Or do you mean ability to go on the property only if the property owner says yes? I'm just trying to more readily define what you mean when you're saying access, so I don't have it incorrect.
Mayor and city council members, it's a good question, because you're correct. There are different types of access. Sometimes, as Hans mentioned, it is access to do activities that we're doing, such as the investigation and that. The legislation passed in July outlines the process to be able to do that. And I think we're working through that to see what would be needed in both cases, whether it's a dig and haul and dig and line, if it's the ability to move forward, or if it would be ownership of the property is needed. In every other case, the agency has come to a binding agreement and an understanding with that landowner on how to move forward. Sometimes the landfill owner did not want to do anything with the landfill and just gave it over to the state. And we have about half of those in the program that are that way. Some chose to continue ownership of it, whether it was a local government or a private entity, and we have a binding agreement to move that forward. So that was always our primary desire, and we've tried for a number of years for that. But the legislation now does allow for us, in the case of an uncooperative landfill, owner to get the access needed based on the project. And so we're working on that exact details on what that would look like.
Access you need, they
Permission.
still retain ownership, but you're able to go on the property and remediate as seen fit. Is that, am I correct on that, on your last sentence?
If that's something we can work out with the landfill owner, we would pursue that option. If that's not, the legislation does allow for a variety, whether it's access or ownership of the property. And that's what we're trying to determine based on the plans, what is the best path forward to make sure that we have access to move forward with the project and make sure that it's done in a way that's cost effective and protective of human health and the environment.
So is it a type of eminent domain, but without having to go through that process?
Mayor and city council members, the legislation outlines that process, so including appraisals and everything else, and how those cost estimates would be worked out. So it's similar, and we built it upon the current existing process. What is different is what we saw is that process plays out, and then the state under the former law would not be able to collect its costs for the cleanup until after the cleanup is done. And so that means the state potentially could provide dollars if it were needed to for taking over ownership of the property. The owner could spend that money, and the state 3 to 8 years later could be saying, you owe us these dollars, and the money that the state had given them is now gone. It's put outside the reach of the state, or that, which would put our state taxpayers in even more risk. The legislation says that process just occurs at the same time. So if the state decides to move forward with acquiring the property, the value as cleanup value would be figured, and the cleanup costs would all be determined at the same time. So that true up occurs at one time, and it does not put at risk state taxpayers. And that's the big change from any other process, because there is that with this cleanup, there are those cleanup costs there.
Okay, And I hate asking again, I'm sorry. So when you say to acquire the property, are you talking about a voluntary transaction or are you talking about an involuntary transaction?
Sure, Mayor and city council members, it could be either. Assigning it through a binding agreement could be a voluntary transaction of the property, or the legislation does have the process that's outlined there for the state to acquire the property. So there's both options, and we're looking to determine what type of access we need based on the design to determine how to move forward and approach the landfill owner moving forward to determine what is the best approach moving forward to. I understand that this is not, there isn't a clear answer right now. We're still working through that. And I understand, and I think that's part of the issue here is we're not able to provide, I think, a one definitive answer right now because we're still working through the process and decisions haven't been made.
Absolutely. No, I completely understand that. I just wanted to make sure I understood like what were the possible actions that could be looked at. Because I know in the past, trying to do an eminent domain proceedings is a very lengthy, expensive thing. This looks far quicker and more streamlined to get the same thing accomplished, which is to if you have someone that does not want to sell, then you can take that property and give them the market value of the property as it is, not as it was remediated. But that does help clear that up quite a bit. So I appreciate your patience with me on that.
Yeah, the other part about that, Kirk, is that you and I have been down this road, and the legislators is the other big factor into this. And for many years, they have not wanted to go down the road of taking ownership of the
Right.
property. One of the things is that they did not want to feather the pocket of the landowner.
But
Kirk?
he's operating at full capacity right now because Waste Management is having to crush down the amount that they can take. So that transfer station is
Yeah.
operating at peak capacity. Like if you didn't want to enrich him, this is not the way to go around it because he is making it like hand over fist right now. He is a happy camper with the stalemate that is happening right now. So the longer before
Yeah.
we get that con, if that gets determined and approved, if
Yeah.
it does, the longer that happens, like the better off he actually is.
And that's all part of the factors that the legislators need to be educated and also understand. You have anything else, Kirk, that you want to add? If not, I have Mr. John Rivisto has a question, and he's on Zoom, and he is with Kramer Mining and Materials. John?
I don't think he accepted being a panelist, but we can ask the question on his behalf.
Already, we're communicating with him.
Oh, okay. I saw in the chat, no thanks, but maybe he changed his mind.
Okay. Did he decide not to ask his question? Okay,
Yeah, do you want to ask it, Madam Mayor?
I think he typed it in.
oh, did he type it in?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
You may not be able to see it. If you allow me, I'll just read it. Has waste been found on all parcels within the freeway ownership and landfill area, or has the actual area impacted been clearly defined yet?
Yeah. Kirk? Hans? Can you read the chat? Kirk and Hans?
It's a question about the area of waste at Freeway Landfill and Freeway Dump. Yes, our project webpage has a map that shows the extent of waste at Freeway Landfill and Freeway Dump that we've mapped. We feel like we've got a good understanding of where that waste is. We're doing a little bit of additional work just to clarify one particular area. We're not expecting to see huge changes. So yes, that information is available. That's on the webpage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Commissioner Kudelka and Hans and David? Commissioner Kudelka, thank you so much for the update. And thank you for your patience and always helping us to understand the process as we go forward. And we really appreciate your partnership in all of this as well. And thank you so much. And I'm sure we're going to be continuing the conversation throughout the year and probably through the legislative session as well.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members, for the opportunity for myself and the team to work with you. And again, thank you too for your team. The city has always been a partner in this and very accessible to help us as we have questions on it. And I know that will continue that spirit of cooperation, and I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, Happy New Year and enjoy the warm weather we are experiencing right now. At least we're in double digits. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is our legislative discussion. City Manager Lee.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. We do have a couple of our legislators here that I
Yeah,
would
if
invite
they
up
would
to
come to the table. Yes,
I
all
don't
three
believe
of
we have,
them.
welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you
welcome.
for being
Hi.
here this evening. I don't
Nice to see
believe
you
we
all.
have anybody joining us on Zoom to any of our legislators, but we do have Ann Linchesky and Angie Huss, who we work with from Lockridge, Grindal, Nolan on legislative issues. And they're available to listen, but certainly can answer any questions should the council have them. If I can, I'll just do a quick summary of the council's adopted 2022 priorities and then turn it back to you,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor.
Before we do that, for our listening audience, I'll have our legislators introduce themselves so people who are watching know who's present. So, Senator.
Yes, hi, I'm Senator Lindsay Port. Hello, I'm Representative Jess Hansen.
And I'm Representative Kayla Berg.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for coming. And I think we have Representative Sandy Mason. She's not on yet. We were trying to get her the information to Zoom in. So, thank you. Okay, Melanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As you discussed last fall, you have adopted and updated legislative priorities for the 2022 session. We have adopted 3 primary policies, 2 of which from last year dropped off because we successfully achieved those. One was a TIF, special TIF legislation for the Burnsville Center area. And the second one was a fire service district. So those are both tools that we have in our toolbox moving
Yeah, and
forward.
before we move on, I want to thank these wonderful women who represent us for helping us pass and achieve those two bills. And so thank you for all of your hard work because we got the TIF.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, thank you for carrying it in the House and thank you for carrying it in the Senate.
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I will echo that sentiment. This is a great team to work with, as well as our staff that has
Yeah.
been instrumental behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
very, very much appreciative of that
Yeah.
partnership.
Chief is here because he's appreciative of the fire district. And so thank you for that.
We do have one item that has remained as a priority, and that's the environmental stewardship. Of course, freeway, landfill, and dump remains a top priority for the council. We did move 2 other items up under priorities. One is we've titled it Innovative Policy Making, and really it speaks to local control. We've visited quite a bit about recent proposals that have sought to limit local control, and as locally elected policy makers, we want to make sure that you maintain the ability to make decisions that are best for the Burnsville community. And the third item is for community safety, and that is primary service areas. This has to do with ambulance service and the ability to provide that, the EMS service within our city limits. We do retain that authority, but that is not broad throughout the state. Certainly, if there are any specific questions about that, Chief Jungman can answer those questions. And then we have two additional supporting positions, which we've held for the last couple legislative sessions. Host Community Grant Program, again, that recognizes the impacts of being a host community for landfills and the opportunity to cooperatively negotiate an aggregate mining fee. So with that, I would be happy to stand for any questions. Turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, well, City Manager Lee, one of the things is to, if you can talk a little bit more, because we want to continue the host community economic development grant because, and this has to do with the impact on the landfill. And then this grant program was put in place so that we can access it for economic development. And we have used it in the past. And if there's anything else within this particular economic development grant program, is there a possibility of it being removed? It's always every year. So we're always looking at it to make sure it doesn't get lost. But
Well, I will
City
hesitate to
Manager
speak
Lee.
on behalf of the legislature and what they may do. What I will say is that we are one of two communities that are eligible for this
Yeah.
grant program. Given the current financial situation, I'd like to believe that it won't be removed, but that certainly is something that we watch closely throughout the legislative
Yeah.
session.
yeah, that's in Inver Grove Heights.
Indeed.
So we were fortunate to get this legislation through in this program. So please watch it vigilantly and make sure that it doesn't go away. We always have to do that every year. Do you have any questions for our staff, for City Manager Lee, or for our fire chief?
Well, I'll just say from, you guys have been great to work with on all of this. Melanie, you're so responsive. We really, really appreciate it. It allowed us to get the TIF done last year, to get the fire district done. I know I speak for all of us when I say we really appreciate the way you work with us. I'm really glad you're talking about innovative policymaking. I think we are in a moment coming out of the pandemic where we all know that not everything's working and we need to find new solutions. I am working particularly closely on housing and affordable housing. And there are a lot of conversations happening there around local control or lack of local control. And I think we are in a moment where, especially as you look at housing prices in Minnesota and you look at the units that we really need, that we need all the tools on the table and we need all hands on deck coming up with creative solutions. So I am really hesitant to sort of jump into blanket policies that feel like they're trying to be a silver bullet, because I think housing policy is really complicated and we need to be creative and work with cities. I will say you guys have been fantastic in that end, but I think it's an ongoing, really serious issue that is going to be in front of us for a long time, unfortunately, but that I am hopeful that we'll come up with creative solutions here that work for Burnsville, as you have been and focusing on this, but it's a place we need to keep pressure on to really make sure that we're serving our residents in fulfilling the needs that they have for their families. We want to keep them in Burnsville. We want to be a place where people are excited to come. And so, I'm very committed to making sure that we are looking at policies that fit our city, but encourage you all to stay in conversation on this, because I think it's going to be a hot button topic at the legislature this year.
Yeah, we know that it's going to be, and one of the things that our organizations like MLC and the league and everybody, is that they seem to be focused, some of the legislation that's been put on the table, focused on just the cost of putting an application through, when that's a very small piece of the entire cost of building a house, when you don't factor in land, labor, materials, etc. And they're only focusing on the cost of our permits. and the cost of putting a process through. So tonight you heard, Councilmember Keely and others talk about, the cost to the taxpayers. Well, let me tell you, when developers come in and they don't want to pay those fees, it is a cost to our taxpayers, to our residents, to our business community, because that's what it is. But we have put together some information that we had to share with MLC and LMC. And perhaps City Manager Lee, we can send that to our legislators, that information, and probably our council members should also see that, because it's not a very big amount when you compare it to the entire cost of building a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any talk about, and this isn't so much in Burnsville because we're built out, but is there any conversation talking about affordable housing, greater latitude in alternative building materials, more ability for homeowners to self-build larger portions of their build, especially if they are using alternative building materials? Because homeowners are really restricted unless they have this license and this license, right? But there are portions of it that a homeowner could do, especially if it's an alternative building material. Is there any thought to that? Because I know that there are so many younger people, but also there's been a big movement of especially women who are leaving bad domestic situations. And so they're needing to look into alternatives, look into smaller, and to look into more of a portion of self-build just to be able to rebuild their life. Has there been any conversation on those areas?
Thanks for the question, Councilwoman Schultz. I haven't heard specific conversations about the self-build piece of it, but there's a lot of conversations happening about smaller size, unique sort of community pairings of maybe small,
Yeah.
tiny home communities, things like that, of alternative materials. There's a lot of conversations around modular housing and
Yeah.
different ways that can bring down the affordability and what that looks like. I haven't heard specifically about the self-build, but I'll look into it because it's a great question. I mean, I really think like we're at a moment where we need to be talking about every solution. And so I'll check into that and get back to you on it, but I haven't heard that specifically.
Thank you.
I would say the same thing, the same sorts of conversations are happening in the House, especially in our bonding committee, looking at the modular homes and other really innovative alternatives, because the need is so great. And typically Dakota County has the least amount of resources for affordable housing when they come down
Right.
from the state. So our delegation, our Dakota County delegation, is also just trying to make some noise and sort of bring some attention to that our way. So I have also not heard about the self-build piece, but I do sit on the bonding committee and as part of the housing group within that committee. And so I can ask if, there are things that the other members have heard, or even bring up the
Yeah.
topic and see where it goes.
And I'll have to, I feel bad because I can't remember off the top of my head, but this kind of jogged that in other states and in some states, depending on how they do theirs, it's county by county on what they allow and don't allow. They're increasing the self build, but they're also providing classes. And when you go through the class, you're able to self-build that module of whatever you're doing. And then they have an inspector come out and look at it. Or if they have a problem during it, they ask the inspector to come out and they can give them ideas and hints on, okay, yes, this needs to be done slightly differently. And so they act almost very advisory in that way. So I've been seeing some of those pilot projects launched out. And and with the vast knowledge that inspectors have, that would be amazing. That would be
Yeah.
really good.
If you can find that, I would love to look. at
I'm gonna
that.
go digging for that. And I want to say it was like, there was like 2 counties in Colorado who had gone into it. I want to say it's either New Mexico or Nevada as a state have gone into it. Because it was definitely a Southwestern, because they were getting into a lot of various types of mud building.
Sure.
Because number one, it's traditional there, and it's very cost effective there,
Right.
and it lasts a long time there, like good climate for that.
Yeah.
I will have to look on that.
So
Sorry.
Definitely please share that, because that
Yeah.
would be amazing resource to bring. to
Always
the
nice when you have a
conversation.
model, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Someone else is already doing this. See, it's not
Right.
scary.
Right.
Okay.
But Senator Port, I really appreciate you saying that, legislation doesn't fit all different communities. Burnsville is different from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and some of the first ring suburbs. They're built out, we're built out, but it's very different. So I know that the Elkin bill, it's like a bullet that's supposed to fix everything. Well, it's not.
Right.
It's going to hurt and harm those of us like Burnsville, but it also takes away local control.
Right.
So my hope is that all of you would acknowledge our election certificate and make decisions for our shared constituents. And, we all work for them.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to make sure that that we're doing what's best for their best interest for all of our citizens here in Burnsville, and for you, Representative Hanson, part of Savage. So, but thank you. You have other questions? City Manager Lee, you have anything else that you need to?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, if I can, you spoke of the handouts. Those were sort of hot off the press this afternoon that we provide to MLC. I'll be happy to send them to our delegation as well as the full council. Again, it was just sort of hot off the press. I think one of the things to keep in mind is Burnsville is different than other communities, right? We are fully grown out. We do have a fair amount of naturally occurring affordable housing.
Absolutely.
And we have a number of programs that are intended to help maintain that. So thinking about, one size fits all is always a little concerning for a local government, but I'll be happy to send you over some of our feedback on some of the housing programs as well as our handout.
That sounds great. As Councilman Workman said, we have a $7 billion budget surplus right now. And I think, looking at those programs that help keep NOAA homes, really keep them affordable, not getting flipped, not getting bought up by developers and turned into expensive homes, it's absolutely necessary as a piece. And I'm really hoping we'll be bulking up some of those programs at the state level. I certainly, that's where my focus will be. So we'll love to stay in touch with you on that.
So the other one that I don't know whether you have enough information, but our fire chief is here, gentlemen, that can talk to you about regulations regarding the provisions for emergency medical service.
That would be great.
Yeah. Fire chief gentleman, yes, he's been working on this for such a long time.
This has been a decade or better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members and legislators. Local control of EMS has been something the city of Burnsville has been interested in for a long time. We are fortunate to have local control. Most other communities are not. So this position has been taken up by the Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association as well as the League of Minnesota Cities. So there's a broader support. You will be seeing a report from the Office of the Legislative Auditor who has looked at EMS. I don't know what that'll say, but I would imagine the next month you will see that. We've commissioned through the Fire Chiefs Association some U of M students that did some research over the past year as well on this topic. And for Burnsville, really what it comes down to is we aren't the only operator in town. We have overlapping ambulance services. And we believe we should be the sole operator of that. There's been opportunities for that to be resolved and the state has not been able to resolve that issue. So we continue to have those overlaps. And every time there's a change of management, that continues to be a contention. And there has been some issues in the past with that. So we believe that we want that resolved for our own community, as well as giving other communities as they go through changes. When this law was established in the early 1980s, communities today look very, very different. How services provided, what can be provided. And right now there is no ability, if you don't own the license, there is really no ability to oversee the cost, the quality, the billing practices, any of that kind of stuff. And a lot of these monopolies are handed out to private entities, and they're allowed, if you don't pay, to go to collections as well as go to revenue recapture on their tax returns. And most citizens wouldn't know how to contest that. So we believe there's a better model. We learned from the U of M research, we're the only state that does it this way. There's only one other state that has primary service areas like we have, but they do have local control provisions in there. We don't have that. So we're looking to get more in line with what the rest of the country is doing and making sure that those that are closest to the service level are making those decisions. So that's kind of a high level overview. I could spend a lot of time talking about detail. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, but it's a very important issue to make sure that these important safety services are provided at a high level. I can tell you that the system is strained right now, and a lot of communities are feeling that. And so now is a better time than ever to address this issue and make sure that communities are well served.
Legislators, would you like an executive summary of this?
Yes.
From
Okay.
BJ?
Yes.
So if you have an executive
Sure.
summary, that'll give them more context,
Yeah.
and then read it and absorb it, and then also ask you questions after you have more knowledge about all of that.
Do you know who's carrying the legislation?
We actually haven't introduced any legislation currently.
You
It's
guys.
right.
Can I sign up?
Go. Right. You guys can make it happen. I know. We haven't introduced anything. We've really been waiting for the OLA audit, and we've been working with the Ambulance Association and trying to find some common ground, because obviously it's much better if we come unified and try to take these steps, because I wouldn't want to go to the other extreme right away. Like we want to work through this and make sure that it's good for everybody, that no one loses out in the process. So we know that big policy swings can have unintended consequences, and we don't want that. We want to work our way up to this so that we ensure that communities are still well served and no one gets left out in the cold. So
Sounds great. A smooth transition seems
Chief,
important.
when you're ready for a bill to be authored, they have been so successful for us.
right.
Yeah, you need to let them know
I
so they can
I know we're bring the bill jackets too.
author the bill and jacket it, and off we go. They've
Perfect.
done such a great job.
Yeah, and we appreciate your support. It's amazing to get that work done. It's
Yeah.
important work, and this is another leg to that stool to really shore up the fire and EMS world in Minnesota. So
Okay.
Absolutely.
thank you.
Councilmember Keely has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Senator Port and House members Hanson and Berg for the help in getting those bills across the finish line. It doesn't happen without recruiting allies from across the aisle and getting good legislation across the line. And many of those things were on our top legislative list for a while. And it's a very good fit. Having been on this council for 15 years now and seeing many of those kind of stall and get stuck and stay there year after year after year. And you just think, are we getting anywhere with these? And then finally a couple at the same time move through and get successfully accomplished at the legislature and move off the list. It is pretty great feeling. So thank you for your help in getting that done.
The amazing trio from Burnsville.
Well, this city is no stranger to putting women in charge and getting things done. So.
Not you guys. Just to point that out.
We're just darn candid.
I think she was pointing at you two, not me, though, right?
You were there, Bob. Your finger went all the way around.
Okay. Do you all have the information you need with our priorities? So, there was a time when there was like, oh, so much on the priority side and on the support side. And as Councilmember Keely said, and here we are. We have 3 that we're focused on and 2 in supporting positions and, so that those are things that we can focus on and with you become successful, because you were successful last year with the get these 2 done. You guys did it. Okay. Yes.
I have a question.
Representative
It is not
Hanson.
on our agenda right now, but it is at the top of kind of as a legislator, things I've been hearing from the community that I just want to take this opportunity to bring up and just ask a question about. I've heard from a number of families in Burnsville who have been impacted by the opioid endemic,
Yeah.
pandemic, whatever we're calling it, the tragedies,
Yeah.
the lives that have been lost. And folks are wondering if the city plans to continue that discussion, considering that extension was made until the 26th. I was wondering if you guys could support us in responding to the constituents that are reaching out to us, and just if you have any information you could share with us, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
As you know, and folks listening may not know, there's over $1 million on the table right now to address the harms that the opioids have caused in our community. It's hard to walk into a room anywhere without somebody saying that it's affected my life or a friend or loved one's life. And as I'm sure you also know, the state will be out $1.8 million in their efforts to continue to do this if Burnsville doesn't choose to join into this settlement. And so in the conversations I've been having with Burnsville residents who have buried their children, they're really concerned about, kind of what's happening after the last, vote, and then seeing that this isn't coming through. So like I said, if there's any information we can just support each other in, and as we talk to constituents, and any hope we can offer the folks who feel like this is still a very big issue in our community and is still affecting the lives of folks, particularly in our Somali communities where we've heard a lot of information from. And it's really hard to just say, no, we're not doing anything. So I was just hoping we could maybe have that conversation now or another time or offline would be fine, but I did want to bring that up.
Yeah. Well, the 3
I don't
members
think
of the-
anyone has said that we're not doing
Yeah.
anything.
I don't know what the state of
We're
affairs is,
doing
so.
quite a bit in Burnsville. And especially what we're seeing with our first responders and
Mhm.
also like our behavioral health
Yeah.
unit, that type of thing. So the idea that we're doing nothing, like that would not be a conversation I would put forward with someone to just say, nope, doing nothing.
Yeah, I don't think the assessment
So
was
that's,
correct either. So
that's
what I would
not,
ask.
not what's happening.
Yeah, that's what
No.
I'd like to ask. too,
Yeah.
is-
And what I'm hearing you say is that, is there an opportunity to recall and reconsider the item?
Yes.
So on the prevailing side is Councilmember Schultz, Councilmember Keely, and Councilmember Workman. So only the 3 of them, as you know, can recall the item for further discussion with new information.
Sure.
So we did not get the information that I think we needed to have.
Gotcha.
I was on the
Gotcha.
dissenting side, so I was on the losing side. I support the settlement. But we didn't get all the information because we did not get that from our chiefs, both fire and police, to understand what the experience is in Burnsville.
Right. Sure.
So we also have a legislature, David Baker, who has been writing to
Mhm,
us,
mhm.
and we've received other information from other residents. So it's up to the prevailing side to recall the item. And that's up to them. So,
Sure.
and that we can take a look at the opioid settlement question.
Great.
And you're right, $1.1 million, you don't sneeze at. There was a lot of discussion about being good stewards of the land and also receiving fees from garbage. Well, this is fees from the opioid epidemic and its cost. And I know that we spend a lot of money with medication, and because our firefighters are both firefighters and paramedics.
Yeah.
And so we also in building the state-of-the-art fire department, we have an inventory room for all of the medication that they use. And Narcan is one of those medications that they use. So, but until, that's done and our staff can do the work to bring that information, to understand what's going on in the city of Burnsville.
Yeah.
And that's data that we didn't have.
Well, if it's helpful, I actually went to straight to people that would know all about the impact on our community. It's a clinic here in town. And I asked, what are you seeing? We're hearing from our community members that this is a problem, but what are you seeing as a clinic who sees this, the people affected by it walk through their doors, whether it's people that have overdosed and survived, or parents or family members that are concerned about somebody who they know is using. And they said they see it all the time in Burnsville. They actually train the county people to use Narcan because the county doesn't train their own. I have a letter after they went to their providers and stakeholders giving data on exactly what they are seeing and the impact it's had on our community and our county. Happy to share that if it's data that you're looking for, so that our residents, our constituents, you mentioned our shared constituents, it's there. Happy to share it if that's helpful for everyone.
I think all information, we've gotten some also with other constituents who have emailed us and all of that. I think all of that is good information for us to have.
I'll share that.
We can't make good decisions without good information and good data.
That's really
data.
helpful. I appreciate the
Yeah, thank you.
explanation. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember.
I wasn't here for the vote that week because I was sick, but I do support the settlement. I think that we could use the money here. Kara talked about our behavioral health unit. It'd be a good start to maybe get a full-time social worker in that health unit, working with people that have the addictions and mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so, as Elizabeth said, one of the people of the three have to call it back so we can have that discussion. And we have to do it before the 26th or it goes away. So it really is in the hands of these three, whether that happens or not.
Yeah, Councilmember Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we got some great information and data from Councilmember Schultz, who's a subject matter expert on this and has testified at the legislature and all around the country. But what we didn't get was a report from our PD, a report from our fire department, a report from the county, a report necessarily from the representatives that have some additional information and the other folks. So I think, I was frustrated because what was presented to us was on a very tight timeline. So we had to make a decision, and it's an unusual subject matter, which I noted that night. This is not something that city councils deal with ever. It's a very rare and unusual circumstance for us to be deciding whether we're going to join a larger lawsuit or not at the state level. Very unusual. And we didn't have a lot. So what we had to go by was very convincing, and it was based on a ton of facts that I wasn't aware of. But if there's more to be learned, I want to respect the process. And I'll call that item to come back because I want to hear all of it out of respect for the process. I have no idea if I'll change my mind because I haven't heard the others, the rest of the data, the other stories. But I do want to hear from our fire department and our police department on how that circumstance, that situation affects them and what they are dealing with. And we also need to remember just separating, illegal fentanyl abuse has nothing to do with the pharmaceutical companies. That's a wholly different problem. And one of the things I want to be cautious about is I don't want to stick a price tag for a public drug abuse problem with illegal fentanyl and other drugs on the drug companies who are making and spending billions in research, bringing incredible drugs to market, like COVID vaccines, for example. So I just want to be very careful that we're dealing with just the opioid issue related to prescriptions, doctor-patient relationships, doctor-patient prescription distributing, and not saying, well, we've got this drug overdose problem from illegal fentanyl and meth and other things, and we need some financial help to help pay for that. That's not the responsibility of the pharmaceutical companies who put out all these great drugs that we all live by and are still living because they do that role and they provide those drugs. So very clear. And I think we can maybe walk through that with a full and more comprehensive process on our end. And so I'll be the one calling that item back, and we'll see if the other two members agree with me or not. Thank you.
All right, so I hope that gives you some insight into the process and how that can continue the conversation. But Councilmember Schultz is right. And you all know that here in Burnsville, we do so much more with regard to how we ensure the safety of our community so, and we have a fire department that's the best. And of course, I am biased.
You never.
Because not only are they firefighters, they're paramedics.
Yeah.
And when I look at the reports that come into us every month, and I see that the paramedic calls are always straight up, they're vertical. And they do a good job with regard to making sure that the buildings are safe and that, they've been out putting fire stoppers in buildings and all different kinds of things, AEDs, and, partnering with like the Lions Club. So we do a lot of things. And as Councilmember Keeley said, opioids is not something we deal with, but they do, but we don't have the information that they need to give to us. And I think that's a valuable piece. And I asked for it when I saw but they could only pull together because they didn't do a deep dive into the analysis of all of that. But now with this, they have the time to do that. They have other things that they're doing, saving lives and keeping the community safe and making sure we don't have, all the other criminal activity that has been experienced in Minneapolis and St. Paul and those first ring suburbs like carjacking, et cetera. Oh, please not.
We've had them.
We've had them.
Yeah, we've had
But
'em.
we have had them, but it's not as,
Rampant.
yeah. Like,
Well, I appreciate your response. I think this will be really helpful for the folks who have contacted me. I'll refer them back to this meeting and this video for more information to just re-loop in with you all. Because I think folks maybe just aren't maybe connecting to the folks they necessarily need to, or, finding these online, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pain that comes with a lot of those messages too, where folks are just, they're really, coming from this and a place of
Representative
suffering too.
Hanson.
So I'm hoping that they can refer back to this and that will help them feel
There's
like they've
also a
got
lot
those
of
answers too.
pain
Yeah.
from people who are not getting the medications they need
Yeah.
and they are going on disability.
Absolutely.
And so there is a
Yeah.
lot of pain on that side of it too.
Madam Mayor.
My issue isn't that there's a problem with addiction. My issue is that we appear to be fine with it. As long as we can just say, oh, well, it's prescriptions, we'll blame it. We did something, we're going to call it good and that's fine.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, why are people addicted
Amen.
and
Yeah.
treating that.
Absolutely. I'm a
Like,
social
yeah,
worker, so
that's
like I
the
feel that.
That's
psychological
the
Yes.
focus.
That's the
That's
disease.
where the
That's the disease.
focus
Yep.
Yeah.
needs to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from on this.
Yeah.
And where I'm coming from on this is the pendulum has swung too far. And we have a lot of people being hurt on the other way,
Right.
but they're not able to talk about it because if they say one word about it, people call them a junkie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not, because you wouldn't call a diabetic a junkie if they took insulin.
Exactly. Exactly.
But these are people that just want to shower, take care of their children, earn an income, not kill themselves. And we have not just placed that in jeopardy. This is the experience that they are currently having in our state and in our community. So they're the ones that are not able to be vocal about this. And they need an advocate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they deserve to be advocated for every bit as much.
Yeah. Everybody. I agree.
So that's the point of view that I'm coming from. So when I'm looking at this issue, I'm also looking at it from that holistic lens.
Good. Yeah.
And I'm also looking at it from the point of view of we are trying to make advances in Burnsville. We do quite a bit. And I would hope that in the future, when you have conversations with people and they say, we're just going to do nothing, that you have a list of things where you can say, that's not what's happening. This is a piece we're talking about. But we're doing all these other things and we're working together on them. So I would hope that that would be the conversation.
Yeah, it leads to a lot of conversations around, the war on drugs in general. It leads to a lot of conversations with access to pain medication. I work on cannabis legalization. So I've had these conversations with folks who rely on opioids to live many times. And so a lot of those folks also, would like to try cannabis for pain management and they're not able to. So there's just
Exactly,
barrier
yeah.
after barrier after barrier. And so the
Yes.
more we can remove and the more we can say, these folks deserve a good quality of life, regardless of what your life sentence of pain is, that's a fair and equal conversation, as well as making sure that, my daughter doesn't have to attend any more funerals for her friends who didn't know what they were getting into. So finding that balance, I've always been a yes and person. Like there's a dichotomy of truth that exists that yes, we can address both things at the same time. I think that's entirely possible. And I am looking forward to all the things we can do. Keep having those conversations about harm reduction. What does that actually look like? Teaching folks about safe use, things like that. I think those are all continued conversations that we are having at the legislature as well, as we talk about, access to housing and, eliminating people who have an opioid addiction from getting housing. There's a lot of issues that kind of compile with that. So I have a lot of lanes that come at this, so I'm just really happy that this body is having the conversation in such a nuanced and heartfelt way. And I think that's really important. It just speaks to our values and I'm
Yeah.
proud to live here. I'm proud to
Yeah.
represent here too.
Councilmember Gustafson has a comment.
This has been extended to the 26th of January. So we have to bring it to a meeting soon. The 18th, you're out of town.
Yeah.
So
well,
we'd have to
there's
probably do a
I'm going
special
to ask
meeting.
you guys to handle it.
Or I'd like to have you there. You're actually pro this settlement.
Yeah, yeah.
I think
But
it'd
I
be
mean,
important.
to recall it, you have to, yeah.
Well, I think
Councilmember.
He said he would
Keely-
recall it.
Yeah, Councilmember Keely has a question.
Yes, I just wanted to articulate, watching the discussion and listening to Councilmember Schultz's points and Representative Hanson's point. I think that is exactly the reason why I think I want this brought back, because that's the kind of full-fledged comprehensive discussion and debate we need to have for us to make a decision like this. And I think, quite frankly, based on what I've learned from paying friends around the metro on other city councils, that we had by far the deepest, most meaningful conversation when we talked about it last week, thanks to Councilmember Schultz's expertise. I think we're going to have probably a precedent-setting one if this were to come back to us, because I think that's a discussion that a lot of other city councils could learn from. And I've understood they're already learning from our discussion last week. And some are taking a second look at this whole thing, because there's a lot of information that just wasn't brought out in a lot of city councils. It's sort of you don't deal with it that much. The staff would put a background together and it might even get on consent or just wave through because it's a big lawsuit. It's a statewide, everybody's getting on board. Okay, what else do I need to know? Right? That's somehow the quicksand that we could fall into as elected on some of these types of things. We didn't. We stepped around it and we had some incredible discussion. And again, tonight, more of the same. And I think it's fantastic. It's been a great learning experience for me. And I want to make sure we make the decision that I can stand behind and defend, no matter who asks me about it. I want to be able to explain and defend my decision. And I thought I could, but there's more to the story that we need to know. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Senator Fort, because, this is no different. This whole issue about the opioid and how there are many factors, just like housing, many factors,
Absolutely.
many tails,
Exactly, yeah.
and all of those kinds of things. So, and it has to do with the psychological aspect of how somebody grew up also. And now we're looking at all of those mental health issues, which is more of this. Senator.
Yes, well, I think the conversation tonight speaks to the relationships that you all have with each other and the relationships that we have with you, that we're able to ask questions and have good dialogue and continue
Absolutely.
conversation. I think that's really important. And I think you're right, Councilmember Keely, maybe a lesson for other cities and legislative partners to take a look at the way we're able to work together. But I do hope, as Councilmember Keely calls it back and this conversation moves forward, that we could be looped in and included. I think we are starting to get questions about this. It's making the news. And it's important that we just stay in dialogue together. So, and certainly as the chiefs present, I would be really interested in hearing that information. So if this is brought back to a future meeting, if you can keep us in the loop on that so that we can hear from all of you, continue to have conversation and make sure that we're supporting you as we're talking to constituents as well.
So if it's recalled on the 18th and we have the discussion and our attorneys in the room, we can call a special meeting to act on this one item. If you want to have all, myself and all
I'm
council
okay with a
members
special
present.
meeting for this
Huh?
item. I'm okay with a special meeting for this item.
Madam Mayor and Council, it is a very unique special circumstance. So I would agree it warrants, if we can make that happen, where all of us are present. I've heard the mayor say this more than once, when we have really large decisions that have far-reaching consequences. She has said it many times. I don't want to have this when someone's going to be on vacation. Let's move it and make sure all 5 of us are present so we can all 5 chime in and then make sure that it's a full council discussion and decision. And I think this one warrants that as well.
So Councilmember Keely can recall it. All of the information can come to us. And then we have a meeting on the 25th and a special meeting on the 25th on this particular item. We've done it in the past, so we can do it. We can, yes, Councilmember Workman.
I had a 45-minute phone call with Representative Baker on Sunday, and he did offer to attend when we brought this back. So if we could let him know.
Nice work for you to do, Councilmember
Well,
Workman.
I suppose I can probably email him.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
well,
can let him know.
We know a lot of the same people in Wilmer, so.
Yes, and not only that, you do know a lot of the same people, and I think he knows your uncle, Tom. very well.
Unfortunately, yeah, we had that. Yep.
Yeah.
Can't escape the
My name, yeah,
Yeah,
they know, yeah, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but
yeah.
he gave me a lot of information that was very helpful and addressed some of the concerns that I expressed at that meeting, namely keeping attorneys out of doctors' offices and making sure that patients were getting the care that they needed. And it was very helpful to hear from him. So.
Okay. Well, now you know.
So it's on the 25th?
Yeah.
Councilmember Keely is recalling the item. And then we'll act on it on the 25th.
Great. We'll be here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's going to be at
Okay.
our fire station, isn't it?
The new one.
No,
Oh,
No, that's the 24th.
oh, 24th. Okay. Never mind. Never mind.
the 25th is a
24th is
Tuesday.
our all-day
It's
work
trying to
session,
stay
that's
on
what
our
I'm saying.
Tuesday, and usually the 4th Tuesday, we either have a governance or set aside for a special meeting, whether that's budget or whatever. So the 4th Tuesday is when we can do that.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
well, it is our pleasure because we are serving the same people. So when we all talk, we all are saying the same message. We care about them. We hear what they're saying, and how do we find the solutions? Okay. All righty. Do you have anything else that you want us to work on as we continue to ask you to work on things for us?
We don't.
Just
Not
keep
that I
being
can think
awesome.
of,
Thank you for
yeah.
being such a great council and great staff and picking up the phone when we call or text or have questions about it. And as you see legislation that if you've got a lane that you're an expert in or someone in the family, let us know. I mean, the more information, the merrier, right? We're better when we do this together. And You know,
Absolutely.
everyone always says elections have consequences and like they assert that to a bad thing, but like, look how great this is. And I'm just really grateful
Yeah.
for it and hoping we can get, TIF 2.0, whatever that's going to be through and do all the things that we need for the city
Yeah.
and the people that live here and call
Yeah.
this home. So thank you.
Truly, we're grateful for all that you do as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else? With that, I need a motion to close the session, please.
No,
No?
you have to read this first.
I will. This meeting will now be closed to the public in accordance to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3. The purpose of the closed session is to conduct the annual performance review of the city manager, Melanie Mescoli. This has been on our schedule. We're just moving it up. And now I need a motion to close the meeting.
Move to close the meeting.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Say nay, and the motion carries.